Go back to where you belong. Preston Cole sneered, slamming his briefcase into the overhead bin as he physically crowded Dr. Nia Toussaint out of seat 1A. The flight attendant watched her silence a complicit endorsement of the man's expensive suit over Nia's dignified presence. Preston smirked, certain he had just won a minor power play against a nobody. Oblivious to the fact that Nia wasn't just a passenger, she was the owner of the very airline now roaring down the runway. As the wheels left the ground, Nia calmly sent a single encrypted code. In 3 minutes, Preston's deal of the century would become a federal investigation, and the plane would turn back to deliver him straight into the hands of waiting authorities. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of overpriced coffee and the palpable anxiety of 5,000 people trying to leave New York simultaneously. Outside, a sleet storm hammered against the reinforced glass, turning the tarmac into a blur of grey slush and flashing orange hazard lights. Dr. and Na Toussaint stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of the first-class lounge, watching a fuel truck navigate the slick concrete. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her sparkling water. At 42, Nia possessed the kind of stillness that usually made loud people uncomfortable. She wore a charcoal wool coat over a cream turtleneck clothes that whispered quality rather than screaming it. There were no logos, no flash, just the soft drape of cashmere and the terrifying precision of a woman who had spent the last 15 years operating inside the human brain. She was exhausted. The merger had taken 6 months of sleepless nights, hostile boardrooms, and endless scrutiny. But it was done. The papers were signed. Technically, as of 8 a.m. that morning, she was no longer just a neurosurgeon. She was the majority shareholder of a massive medical conglomerate. But nobody here knew that. To the world, she was just a tired woman holding a ticket for Flight 882 to Zurich. I don't care what the system says. Fix it. The voice boomed across the lounge, shattering the quiet atmosphere. Nia didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She had been listening to the man for the last 20 minutes. Preston Cole was pacing the length of the buffet, a phone pressed to his ear and a scotch glass dangerously tilted in his other hand. He was the type of man who took up more space than his physical body required. He wore a navy pinstripe suit that looked bespoke, but was worn with the frantic energy of a man trying too hard to prove he owned the room. "I am flying to Zurich to close the deal of the century," Gary Preston shouted, ignoring the glare of an elderly woman reading a newspaper nearby. "I need the upgrade confirmed. I am not sitting in business like a peasant. I want first row 1 the bulkhead. Make it happen, or you're fired." Nia watched the reflection of the man in the window. He was red-faced, sweating slightly despite the air conditioning. He hung up the phone with a violent jab of his thumb and marched towards the lounge concierge. Nia checked her watch. Boarding was in 10 minutes. She picked up her leather tote bag and walked towards the exit, passing Preston as he berated the young woman at the desk. "Sir, as I said, first class is fully booked." The concierge said, her voice trembling slightly. "We have a full flight. There's always a seat for a platinum partner." Preston sneered, slamming his hand on the marble counter. "Check again. Bump someone. I don't care who. Do you know who I am? I'm with Archon Global." Nia paused for a microcond. Archon Global. The name was familiar. It was a mid-tier logistics firm that her new conglomerate had flagged for a potential audit next quarter. She suppressed a dry smile and continued walking. The walk to gate B32 was a gauntlet of noise. Announcements for delayed flights echoed over the PA system. Nia kept her head down, clutching her boarding pass, digital and physical, just in case. Seat 1A. It was her sanctuary. She needed to sleep for the next 8 hours. When she arrived at the gate, the crowd was already pressing against the velvet ropes. The gate agents looked harried, typing furiously on their terminals. The storm was causing havoc with the schedules, and tempers were short. Nia stood in the priority lane, waiting for the call. "We are now inviting our first-class passengers to board," the agent announced. Nia stepped forward. She scanned her pass. The machine let out a pleasant beep and the small plastic doors swung open. She walked down the jet bridge, the cold air from the gaps in the metal tunnel biting at her ankles. She was the first one on the plane. The cabin was pristine, bathed in soft blue LED lighting. The flight attendants were still stowing their bags, looking surprised to see a passenger so early. "Good evening," Nia said softly, stepping into the galley. "Welcome aboard," said the lead attendant, a woman whose name tag read Jessica. She had a tight, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She glanced at Nia's jeans, high-end denim, but still denim, and her messy bun. Her eyes flickered down to Nia's bag, then back up. "Let me check your stub, please." Nia handed it over. Jessica looked at the ticket. 1A. She sounded skeptical. She looked at her manifest. "Oh, I see. Right this way." There was no offer to take her coat. No offer of a pre-departure beverage. Jessica simply pointed a manicured finger towards the seat on the left. "Thank you," Nia said unfazed. She was used to being underestimated. In her line of work, being underestimated was a tactical advantage. Nia settled into the wide leather seat. She placed her bag under the ottoman, took out her noise-cancelling headphones, and closed her eyes. She didn't want champagne. She didn't want warm nuts. She just wanted silence. She was drifting into a light doze when the commotion started. It wasn't just noise. It was a physical disturbance in the air. Heavy footsteps thudded against the floorboards, accompanied by the rustle of expensive luggage hitting the sides of the aisle. Unbelievable. Absolute incompetence, the voice grumbled. Nia opened one eye. Preston Cole was standing in the aisle, looming over her. He was breathless, his tie slightly askew, holding a boarding pass that looked like it had been crumpled in a fist fight. Behind him stood Jessica, the flight attendant, looking flustered. "Excuse me," Preston said, his voice dripping with faux politeness that masked aggressive entitlement. "You're in my seat." Nia removed her headphones slowly. She looked at him then, at the empty seat across the aisle, 1F. Then she looked back at him. "I believe you're mistaken," Nia said calmly. "This is seat 1A. I have the ticket for it." Preston laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Lady, look. I don't know how you got up here. Maybe an upgrade glitch. Maybe you know someone in baggage handling. But I book 1A on every flight I take. It's my office. I need the window for the light to work. It's 900 p.m. Nia, Clear's throat, noted. "It's dark outside." Preston's face flushed a darker shade of crimson. He turned to Jessica. "Tell her I'm Preston Cole, Archon Global. I spent 40 minutes on the phone with your Vice President of Sales to get this sorted. Get her out of my seat." Jessica looked between the two of them. On one side, Preston Cole, loud, wearing a suit, flashing a platinum status card, throwing around corporate titles. On the other side, Nia Toussaint, a black woman in jeans, soft-spoken, reading a paperback book she had just pulled from her bag. The bias kicked in. It wasn't conscious, perhaps, but it was immediate. Jessica saw money and power in Preston. She saw something else in Nia, something she felt she could manage. "Mom," Jessica said, stepping closer to Nia. Her voice took on that condescendingly sweet tone adults use with toddlers. "Could I see your boarding pass again? There might have been a double booking error." Nia didn't blink. She handed the pass to Jessica. Jessica stared at it. It clearly said 1A. She looked at her digital manifest. It said Tong Nia. But then Preston shoved his phone in Jessica's face. "Look, my app says 1A. The agent at the gate just changed it. She said she bumped the placeholder." He glared at Nia as he said, "Placeholder." Jessica made a decision. It was the path of least resistance. She didn't want a shouting match with a platinum member who claimed to know her VP. "Ma'am," Jessica said, her smile vanishing. "It seems there has been a computer error. Mr. Cole has priority status for this bulkhead seat due to his corporate account. I'm going to have to ask you to move." Nia stayed seated. Her heart rate didn't spike. Her hands didn't shake. "I paid full fare for this seat, Jessica. 3 weeks ago. I am not moving." "Look, I don't have time for this," Preston shouted. He reached up and opened the overhead bin directly above Nia's head, slamming his briefcase inside, dangerously close to her face. "I have a merger to review. You're holding up the flight. Just go back to where you belong." The cabin had gone silent. The other first-class passengers, a tech bro in a hoodie, and 2F, an older couple in row 3, were watching. Nobody spoke up. They watched with that detached curiosity of the wealthy, grateful the drama wasn't happening to them. "Where I belong," Nia repeated, her voice dropping an octave. It was colder now. "Economy," Preston snapped. "Or business if you're lucky. Look, take the compensation voucher and go. You're embarrassing yourself." Jessica tapped Nar on the shoulder. "A breach of protocol. Mom, the captain is waiting to push back. If you don't cooperate, I'll have to call security to escort you off the plane for being disruptive. We have a seat in 34B. It's an aisle. It's the best we can do." Nia looked at Jessica's hand on her shoulder. She looked at Preston's sneer. She realized what was happening. This wasn't about a computer glitch. This was a power play. And if she refused, they would drag her off in handcuffs. That would make the news. That would hurt the merger. That would damage the reputation of the company she now owned. She needed to be smarter. She needed to let them dig the hole deep enough to bury themselves. 34B, Nia said. "Yes," Jessica said, relieved. "Let me grab your bag." Nia stood up. She smoothed the front of her coat. She looked Preston Cole dead in the eye. "Enjoy the light," she said. She walked out of first class, past the galley, past the curtain. The walk was long. She passed the business class pods where people were sipping champagne. She passed the premium economy seats with the extra legroom. She kept walking until the carpet turned from plush blue to thin grey industrial fabric. Row 34 was in the back third of the plane, right next to the lavatories. The air smelled of disinfectant and recycled food. Seat 34B was a middle seat wedged between a teenager with oversized headphones and a man who was already asleep and snoring, his elbow encroaching 3 inches into her space. Na sat down. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for water. She pulled out her phone. "Ma'am, you need to turn that to airplane mode," a junior flight attendant said, rushing past. "I will," Nia said. "One moment." She opened her encrypted messaging app. She found a contact listed only as Director Aviation Operations. She typed a single message. "Code 77 Alpha Flight 882 Override Authorization. Toussaint 0001. Execute immediately." She hit send. She watched the little checkmark turn blue. Then she switched her phone to airplane mode, clasped her hands in her lap, and waited. The plane pushed back from the gate 12 minutes late. The captain, a man named Miller, with a reassuring baritone voice, came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the slight delay in boarding. We've got some weather out there, but we're going to make up the time in the air. Flight time to Zurich is 7 hours and 40 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the service." The engines roared to life, a deep vibrato that shook the floorboards in row 34, much more than it did in row 1. Na stared at the seat back in front of her. It was peeling slightly at the corner. As the plane taxied, Nia closed her eyes and replayed the interaction. The humiliation burned a cold fire in her chest. It wasn't just the seat. It was the assumption. The assumption that she was displaceable, that her comfort was secondary to Preston Cole's ego. She thought about Preston in 1A. He was probably stretching his legs out right now. Jessica was likely pouring him a glass of the 2015 vintage champagne, the one Nia had personally selected for the first-class menu during the acquisition meetings last week. He was drinking her champagne, sitting in her seat, flying on her plane. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. The plane accelerated. The G-force pressed Nia into the cramped middle seat. The man next to her snorted in his sleep, and his head lolled onto her shoulder. She gently pushed him back with a single finger. They broke through the cloud layer. The turbulence smoothed out. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Usually, this was when the carts would start rolling. But 3 minutes after the chime, exactly 3 minutes, the plane banked. It wasn't a subtle course correction. It was a hard left bank, steep enough that the passengers on the right side of the plane gasped as they looked down and saw nothing but black ocean, while the passengers on the left saw the moon swing wildly across the window. "Whoa," the teenager next to Nia said, pulling off his headphones. "That's sharp." The plane leveled out, but the engine pitch changed. They weren't climbing anymore. They were throttling back. A murmur went through the cabin. People were looking around. The flight attendants in the back galley stopped preparing the beverage carts. They were looking at the interphone handset, waiting for it to ring. It rang. The junior attendant picked it up. Nia watched her face. The color drained out of the young woman's cheeks. She said, "Yes, Captain," 3 times, her voice getting quieter each time. She hung up and looked at her colleague. "We're turning around," she whispered, loud enough for rows 33 through 35 to hear. "Mechanical," the colleague asked. "No security order from the ground. Immediate return to JFK." The word security rippled through the back of the plane like an electric current. Passengers started whispering. Was it a bomb? A terrorist? A fugitive? Then the PA system clicked on. Captain Miller's voice was different this time. Tense, tight. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We have received an order from air traffic control to return to New York immediately. This is not a mechanical issue. I repeat, the aircraft is perfectly safe. However, we have been grounded by corporate directive. We will be landing in approximately 20 minutes. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Grounding by corporate directive." The teenager looked at Nia. "What does that mean? Did the airline go bust while we were taking off?" Nia looked at him. She allowed herself a very small, very cold smile. "Something like that," she said. "Up in first class, the atmosphere was different." Preston Cole was furious. He had his laptop open and a spreadsheet loaded. He slammed the lid shut when the announcement was made. "You have got to be kidding me," he yelled. "Jessica, what is this?" Jessica hurried over, looking pale. "I don't know, Mr. Cole. The captain said it's a corporate grounding. I have a meeting at 9 a.m. in Zurich." Preston shouted, standing up. "I cannot go back to New York. Do you know how much this deal is worth? Get the pilot on the line. Tell him I authorize him to keep going." "Sir, I can't. I am a platinum partner." Preston roared, spit-flying. "I practically own this airline. I know the CEO. He didn't know the CEO. He knew the old CEO, a man named Richard Sterling who had been ousted 6 hours ago. He definitely didn't know the new owner." "Sir, please sit down," Jessica pleaded. "We are beginning our descent." The plane descended aggressively. The spoilers on the wings engaged, shuttering the frame as they killed the lift. They were coming in heavy, full of fuel. Nia sat in the back, calm amidst the rising panic. A baby was crying in row 30. The man next to her was awake now, gripping the armrests. "Why are we going back?" he asked Nia, his eyes wide. "Is it the engine?" "The engines are fine," Nia assured him. "It's a personnel issue. Personnel like the pilot is sick." "No," Nia said, staring ahead at the blue curtain that separated the classes. Like the passenger list was incorrect. The landing was rough. The plane hit the runway hard, the brakes screaming as the massive machine fought to stop with a full fuel load. The reverse thrusters roared like dragons. They didn't taxi to the gate. The plane came to a halt on a remote apron far away from the terminal. Outside, the flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers illuminated the wet tarmac. There were at least 5 cars and 2 black SUVs. "Oh my God," the teenager whispered. "They're coming for someone." "Yeah," Nia said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "They are." The captain came on the PA again. "Folks, please remain seated. We have authorities boarding the aircraft. Please keep the aisle clear." The front door opened. Cold air rushed into the cabin. From her vantage point in the back, Nia couldn't see the door, but she could hear the heavy boots clumping on the floor. She could hear the radio chatter. 2 police officers and 2 men in suits. Federal Aviation Administration agents walked onto the plane. They didn't stop in the galley. They walked straight into the first-class cabin. Preston Cole saw them coming. He smirked. He adjusted his tie. He assumed they were there to escort him off first, perhaps to a private jet to get him to his meeting. He was, after all, the most important person on the plane. "Officers," Preston said, standing up. "About time." This is a disaster. I need to file a formal complaint against this airline. I expect to be rerouted immediately. The lead agent, a tall man with a buzz cut, stopped in front of row 1. He looked at Preston. Then he looked at the manifest in his hand. "Are you Preston Cole?" the agent asked. "Yes, finally." "Someone who knows how to read," Preston snapped. "Get my bags." The agent didn't move to get the bags. He stepped aside. "Mr. Cole, please sit down and be quiet," the agent said. It wasn't a request. Preston blinked. "Excuse me." "Sit down." The agent turned his back on Preston. He looked at Jessica. "Where is Dr. Nia Toussaint?" Jessica froze. Her eyes darted to the empty seat in 1A, then to the curtain leading to the back. Jessica stammered. She's in the main cabin." "The main cabin." The agent's eyebrows shot up. "You put the owner of the airline in economy." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Preston's mouth fell open. "What Dr. Nia Toussaint?" the agent repeated, his voice carrying through the silent cabin. "The chairwoman of Toussaint Medical, the entity that acquired this airline at 8 a.m. this morning. You put her in seat 34B. Jessica looked like she was going to faint. "Go get her," the agent ordered. Now Jessica scrambled through the curtain. She ran down the aisle, past the confused business class passengers, past the staring faces in premium economy. She reached row 34, breathless, sweating, terrified. She found Nia reading her book. Dr. Toussaint," Jessica squeaked. Nia marked her page. She closed the book. She looked up at the woman who had threatened to call security on her 40 minutes ago. "Hello, Jessica," Nia said pleasantly. "Is there a problem?" "Please," Jessica gasped. "Please come to the front there. Everyone is waiting." Nia stood up. She grabbed her bag. She looked at the teenager next to her. "Nice meeting you," she said. She walked up the aisle. It was a long walk, but this time it wasn't a walk of shame. Every head turned to watch her. She walked with the same slow, deliberate pace she used in the operating room. She passed through the curtain into first class. The police officers stood at attention. The FAA agents nodded respectfully. Preston Cole was standing by seat 1A, his face a mask of horror. He looked at Nia, the jeans, the messy bun, the calm eyes. He looked at the seat he had stolen. Nia stopped in front of him. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I believe you're in my seat." The silence in the first-class cabin was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster or a prison riot. Preston Cole stood in the aisle, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled onto a dock. He looked at Dr. Neon, then at the federal agents, then at the flight attendant, Jessica, who was currently gripping the beverage cart as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "This is insane," Preston finally managed to choke out. His voice lacked its previous boom. It was thin, reeking of desperation. "You can't be." You look like he gestured vaguely at her attire. "I look like a passenger who paid for a ticket." Nia said, her voice smooth and dangerous. Specifically, a passenger who paid for seat 1A. "But you didn't see a passenger, did you, Mr. Cole? You saw an opportunity to exert dominance. I have platinum status." Preston yelled, the panic finally breaking through his arrogance. He turned to the lead agent, whose badge identified him as Special Agent Miller, no relation to the captain. "Officer, this is a prank, a misunderstanding. I want to speak to the CEO of this airline right now." Agent Miller stepped forward, invading Preston's personal space. "Mr. Cole, you are currently speaking to the owner of the airline and you are shouting at her. That's impossible." Preston scoffed, though his eyes darted nervously to Nia. "Toussaint Medical is a healthcare company. They make surgical robots. They don't fly planes." Nia took a step forward. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. "We do when the logistics of organ transport become too unreliable due to commercial airline incompetence. We bought the carrier this morning to ensure our supply chain remained uncompromised. My first order of business was to fly to Zurich to audit the European hub. I decided to fly incognito to see how your staff treats regular customers. She paused, her gaze sliding over to Jessica, who flinched. Clears throat. I have my answer. So what? Preston puffed out his chest, trying to regain ground. So I took a seat. It's a civil matter. You grounded a transatlantic flight because you got bumped. That's a misuse of resources. I'll sue you for unlawful imprisonment. I'll sue the FAA. Captain Miller. The pilot emerged from the cockpit. He looked furious. He had his cap tucked under his arm, and he was glaring at Jessica. It's not a civil matter, sir. The captain said, his voice hard. Dr. Toussaint initiated code 77 Alpha. That is a distress signal reserved for when the command structure of the airline has been compromised. When the flight crew demonstrates they are unable to follow the chain of command or basic safety protocols regarding the passenger manifest, the aircraft is deemed unsafe. Unsafe. Preston laughed incredulously. Because of a seat. Because if my lead flight attendant is willing to violate federal aviation regulations regarding passenger manifests just because a man in a suit yells at her, the captain said, turning his anger toward Jessica, then she cannot be trusted in an emergency. If she can be bullied into moving a passenger, she can be bullied into opening a cockpit door. The flight is compromised. The crew is suspended immediately. Jessica let out a sob. Captain sighed. He said he knew the VP. You didn't check. The captain snapped. You guessed. Agent Miller reached for his belt. The sound of handcuffs rattling echoed through the cabin. Preston's eyes went wide. Whoa, whoa, what are you doing? Preston Cole. Agent Miller said, his tone bored and official. You are being detained for interference with a flight crew and creating a security disturbance aboard a commercial aircraft. You're also being detained for questioning regarding potential corporate espionage. Espionage, Preston shrieked. I sell logistics software. You forced your way onto a flight carrying the owner of a rival conglomerate, displaced her, and attempted to intimidate her. Miller said, snapping the cuff onto Preston's right wrist. Given the sensitive nature of the merger, Dr. Toussaint just closed, we have to assume your actions were a calculated attempt to disrupt her schedule and sabotage the deal. That makes this a federal investigation. It was a stretch, and Nia knew it. But in the post-9/11 world, interfering with a flight was a blank check for law enforcement, and she had the best lawyers in New York on speed dial to make the charges stick. Turn around, Miller ordered. Preston resisted. He yanked his arm back. No. Do you know who I am? I am a partner at Archon. I make $3 million a year. Stop resisting. The second officer shouted, grabbing Preston's other arm. They wrestled him into the aisle. Preston kicked out his expensive loafer, connecting with the shin of the tech bro in seat 2F. Ow, watch it. The passenger yelled, holding up his phone. He had been recording for the last 3 minutes. Get that camera out of my face. Preston roared, his face purple, as they shoved him against the bulkhead. Get him off my plane, Nia said quietly. They dragged him. Literally dragged him. Preston Cole, the man who needed extra legroom, was hauled down the jet bridge with his toes scraping the carpet, shouting obscenities about lawsuits and knowing senators. When he was gone, the silence returned. Nia turned to Jessica. Jessica was shaking. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Dr. Toussaint? I didn't know, I swear. I thought he was so aggressive. I just wanted to keep the peace. You didn't keep the peace, Jessica. Nia said, a voice devoid of sympathy. You kept the hierarchy. You looked at him and you looked at me and you decided he was worth more. You decided my ticket, my contract with this airline was voidable because I didn't look like I could fight back. I'm sorry, Jessica whispered. Please don't fire me. I have a mortgage. My daughter is in college. Na looked at her. She wasn't cruel. She was a surgeon. She cut out the rot to save the patient. I'm not firing you, Jessica, Nia said. Jessica slumped with relief. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm grounding you, Nia corrected. You will undergo 6 months of retraining, not safety training, bias training. And you won't be doing it here in New York. You'll be doing it at our customer service center in Let's See Tulsa at your own expense. Jessica's face fell. And Jessica Neer added picking up her bag from seat 34B, where the agent had retrieved it. The next time someone tells you they're important, remember this moment. Importance isn't about the volume of the voice. It's about the validity of the ticket. Neer turned to the rest of the cabin. The passengers were staring at her with awe and fear. "Ladies and gentlemen," Neer announced, her voice projecting clearly. "This flight is cancelled. A new crew is being assembled. Another aircraft, a larger one, is being prepped at Gate A4. You will all be receiving full refunds for your tickets, plus a $5,000 travel voucher for the inconvenience. Thank you for flying. Well, thank you for flying with me." She walked off the plane head high, leaving the stunned cabin behind her. The holding room at JFK wasn't a jail cell, but it wasn't the first-class lounge either. It was a sterile, windowless room used by Customs and Border Protection for secondary interviews. It had grey linoleum floors, harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets, and a metal table bolted to the floor. Preston Cole sat on a metal chair, his hands cuffed in front of him. His tie was gone, taken as a suicide precaution. His shoelaces were gone. He looked less like a master of the universe and more like a man who had lost a bar fight in a cheap motel. The door opened. He expected a lawyer. He expected his wife. He expected someone to come in and apologize. Instead, Dr. Nia Tucson walked in. She had changed. She was no longer in her travel clothes. She was wearing a crisp white blazer and black trousers, an outfit that somehow made her look even taller. She carried a thick file folder. Behind her walked a man Preston recognized with a jolt of terror. It was Arthur Pendleton, the General Counsel for Archon Global, Preston's own company. "Arthur." Preston scrambled up. "Thank God. Get these cuffs off me. This woman is crazy. She hijacked the plane. You have to sue her. We need to call the press." Arthur Pendleton didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. He looked at Preston with the sort of distaste one usually reserves for something stepped in on a sidewalk. "Sit down, Preston," Arthur said. Preston froze. "What, sit down?" Preston sank back into the chair. "Arthur, what is going on? Why are you here with her?" Nia placed the folder on the table. She sat opposite Preston. She folded her hands. "Mr. Cole," Nia began, "do you remember the deal of the century you were flying to Zurich to close? Yes. The supply chain merger with the Swiss medical group. That's why I need to get out of here. If I miss that meeting tomorrow morning, the deal falls through. The meeting is cancelled." Nia said, "You can't cancel my meeting." "I can," Nia said softly, "because I am the Swiss medical group." Preston stared at her. "What, Toussaint Medical acquired the Swiss group 3 days ago?" Nia explained, as if explaining gravity to a child. "The deal you were going to pitch it was a logistics contract to handle the distribution of our new neuro implants. A contract worth $400 million over 5 years. Preston's mouth went dry. He felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him dizzy. You are the client." "I am the client," Nia confirmed. "And I was flying to Zurich to sign the final authorization. I wanted to see the logistics partner in action. I wanted to know if Archon Global shared our values. Values like integrity, respect, attention to detail." She opened the folder. Inside was a copy of the contract Preston had spent 6 months negotiating. It was flagged with sticky notes. I found, Nia continued, that the senior leadership of Archon Global, specifically you, lacks the temperament required to handle sensitive medical equipment. If you can't handle a seating chart, Preston, I certainly can't trust you with transporting live human organs. She slid the contract across the table toward Arthur. Arthur, Nia said, "Toussaint Medical is formally invoking the character and repute clause of the preliminary agreement. We are terminating our relationship with Archon Global effective immediately." Arthur nodded solemnly. He took a pen from his pocket. He drew a large X across the front page of the contract. "Wait!" Preston screamed. He lunged forward, but the cuffs caught on the table leg. "Arthur, you can't let her do this. This is one contract. I bring in millions. This is personal. She's doing this out of spite." Arthur looked at Preston. "Preston, Do you know what happens when a company loses a $400 million anchor contract on the day of signing? Preston shook his head, trembling. The stock drops, Arthur said. Archon stock is down 12% in after-hours trading because the news of your arrest leaked, and the news of the contract cancellation will hit the wires in 10 minutes. My arrest leaked, Preston whispered. There's a video, Nia said. From the plane, a young man in seat 2F. It has 3 million views on TikTok. The hashtag is #firstclassbully. Preston put his head in his hands. You're fired, Preston, Arthur said coldly. For cause gross misconduct, public endangerment bringing the company into disrepute. There will be no severance, no stock options, and we are suing you for the damages to the stock price. You can't, Preston sobbed. I have a mortgage. I have 2 ex-wives. I have tuition payments. You should have thought about that, Nia said, standing up, before you decided that your comfort was more important than my dignity. She walked to the door. She paused and looked back. By the way, she said, I checked the manifest again. Seat 34B, the man next to it. He was an air marshal. If you had just gone back there, you would have had the safest seat on the plane. But you wanted the spotlight. She tapped the doorframe. Now you have it. The world moves fast, but the internet moves faster. By the time Nia walked out of the holding room pinging into the main terminal, Preston Cole wasn't just fired. He was a global meme. The video from seat 2F was damning. It showed everything. It showed Preston throwing his bag into the bin. It showed him snarling at Nia. It showed him telling her to go back to where she belongs. It showed the agents dragging him off, kicking and screaming like a toddler. But the internet detectives had done more than just watch. They had dug. Within an hour, Reddit threads had exposed Preston's history. There were stories from his college days, fraternity hazing incidents that had been swept under the rug. There was a lawsuit from a former assistant involving a throne stapler that had been settled out of court. Nia sat in the back of her black SUV, watching the city lights blur by as her driver took her to her Manhattan penthouse. She scrolled through the comments on her phone. *user 88. Imagine telling the owner of the airline to move. The audacity is infinite. *flygirl_99. I'm a flight attendant and I am cheering. We deal with guys like this every day. Finally, someone humbled him. *karma cop. The way the captain shut him down, though. If she can be bullied into moving a passenger, she can be bullied into opening a cockpit door. Chills. Nia didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. This wasn't a victory she had sought. It was a correction she had been forced to make. Her phone buzzed. It was her PR director, Sarah. Dr. Toussaint, Sarah said, sounding breathless. The media is going crazy. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. They all want a statement. And there's something else? What is it, Sarah? The video didn't just hurt Preston. It's hurting the airline brand. People are saying the flight attendant Jessica represents a systemic issue. They're calling for a boycott of the airline until we prove we've changed. Nia sighed. I handled Jessica. She's in retraining. The public wants blood doctor. They want to know that you're not just a rich owner protecting the staff. They want to know you care about the people in 34B. Nia looked out the window. She saw a billboard for the airline. It featured a smiling blonde pilot giving a thumbs up. Fly the friendly skies. Set up a press conference, Nia said. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. in the terminal. Not the VIP lounge, the main concourse gate B32. What are you going to say? I'm going to change the rules? Nia said. The next morning, gate B32 was a zoo. Cameras from every major network were set up behind velvet ropes. A podium had been placed in front of the gate where the incident had occurred. Nia walked out. She wasn't wearing a suit this time. She was wearing the same outfit she had worn on the plane. The jeans, the turtleneck, the coat. She stepped up to the microphone. The flashes were blinding. Yesterday, Nia began, her voice echoing through the terminal. I was reminded of a simple truth. A ticket is a contract, but dignity is a right. She looked into the cameras. Mr. Preston Cole treated me like an obstacle because he thought he had more value than I did. He thought his status card gave him the right to displace me and my staff. They agreed with him. A hush fell over the crowd. I acquired this airline to move medical equipment. But today, I realize I have a bigger responsibility. I am announcing a complete restructuring of our boarding protocols. Effective immediately status will no longer override a confirmed seat assignment. If you buy a seat, it is yours. I don't care if the Pope walks onto the plane and wants your window. It is yours. There was a ripple of applause from the travelers standing nearby. Furthermore, Nia continued, I am establishing the 34B fund, the $400 million that would have gone to Preston Coo's company. It is now going into a scholarship program for underprivileged students pursuing careers in aviation and aerospace engineering, specifically for those from marginalized communities. The applause grew louder. We need pilots, engineers, and executives who understand that the most important part of the plane isn't first class. Nia said, her voice rising. It's the fuselage. Because if the plane goes down, we all go down together. It's time we started treating each other that way on the ground. She stepped back. The terminal erupted, but in the shadows of the concourse, watching on a monitor, stood a figure who wasn't clapping. It was a man in a hooded raincoat. He was watching Nia with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Preston Cole was out on bail. He had lost his job, his reputation, and his fortune, but he hadn't lost his ego. He pulled his phone out. It was a burner phone. He dialed a number. She thinks it's over, Preston whispered into the phone. She thinks she can just ruin my life and give my money to charity. No, I want to hurt her. I want to take the one thing she cares about more than her company. And what is that? The voice on the other end asked. It was a raspy, distorted voice. Her reputation, Preston said. I know about the Geneva incident, the one she buried 10 years ago. Dig it up. I want it on every screen in America by noon. Preston hung up. He looked at Nia on the screen one last time. Enjoy the applause, Doctor? He sneered. The turbulence is just beginning. The applause at Gate B32 had barely faded when the first notification hit Nia's phone. It wasn't a congratulatory text. It was a link sent by an unknown number. She ignored it at first, stepping into the secure elevator with her security detail. But then, Sarah, her PR director, gasped, Dr. Tucson, you need to see this now. Sarah held up her tablet. The headline on a gossip site called The Daily Leak was screaming in bold red font. Saint the dark secret Dr. Nia Toussaint buried in Switzerland. Nia felt the blood run cold in her veins. Geneva 10 years ago. Read it. Nia said, her voice steady but tight. Sarah hesitated. It says that during your residency in Geneva, you falsified medical records to cover up a botched surgery on a diplomat's son. It claims you were quietly dismissed from the program and that your medical license is built on a lie. They have documents. Nia snatched the tablet. She scrolled through the article. There were scans of hospital admission forms, internal emails, and a disciplinary hearing transcript. These are fake, Nia said instantly. I was never dismissed. I transferred to Johns Hopkins to specialize in neurotrauma. And the diplomat's son, I saved his life. He had a ruptured aneurysm. The other attending froze. I stepped in. But the documents look real, Sarah whispered. And look at the source. The source wasn't named, but the framing was specific. It used phrases like arrogant disregard for protocol and God complex. Phrases Preston Cole had screamed at her in the holding cell. He's trying to destroy my credibility. Nia realized if the board thinks I lied about my medical history, the merger is void. The stock crashes and I lose my license. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor of the Toussaint building. It was chaos. Phones were ringing off the hook. Her assistant ran up to her. Doctor, the Swiss Medical Board is on line 1. They're launching an inquiry. The stock has already dropped 8% in 10 minutes. The shareholders are calling for an emergency vote of no confidence. Nia walked into her office and slammed the door. She went to the window, looking out at the grey New York skyline. Preston Cole was desperate. He was using the last of his resources to fabricate a scandal. But he had made a mistake. He assumed Nia Toussaint had buried her past because she was ashamed of it. She hadn't buried it. She had protected it. She picked up her desk phone. She didn't call her lawyer. She called a number with a +41 country code. "This is Dr. Toussaint," she said, when the line connected. "I need to speak to Ambassador Weber immediately." A pause, then a heavy accented voice. "Nia, it has been a long time," Heinrich Nia said. "Someone is using your son's medical history to blackmail me. They are claiming I botched the surgery." There was a silence on the other end, a silence filled with a decade of gratitude. Who? Heinrich Weber asked. His voice was low dangerous. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was the head of the European Union's Ethics Committee, a man named Preston Cole. He's leaked forged documents. Nia Heinrich said, "My son is playing tennis today because of your hands. You did not botch the surgery. You defied a cowardly attending surgeon to save him. The hospital sealed the records to protect the reputation of the senior doctor, not you. I need those records unsealed, Heinrich. Now it will ruin the career of Dr. Müller," Heinrich warned. "He is the chief of surgery now. He let a boy die on the table because he was afraid of the risk." Nia said, "I won't let a man like Preston Cole destroy my life with a lie that protects a coward. Release the unedited surgical logs and the video." The video, the O camera. Nia said, "I know you have a copy. You kept it as insurance." "I did," Heinrich admitted. "Give me 1 hour." Underscore, 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 underscore. Meanwhile, in a cheap hotel room in Queens, Preston Cole was watching the news with a bottle of vodka in his hand. He was laughing. "Look at her fall," he slurred, pointing at the TV screen where pundits were debating Nia's ethics. "Fraud liar, she's done." His phone rang. It was Arthur Pendleton. "Preston," Arthur said. "What did you do? I leveled the playing field, Arthur. I told you I'd get her. I had a contact in Geneva fabricate. Find some interesting files." "You idiot," Arthur hissed. "You didn't just leak files. You poked a bear. Do you know who Heinrich Weber is? Who cares? Turn on the TV, Channel 4. Preston switched the channel. The screen showed a live feed from Brussels. Ambassador Heinrich Weber was standing at a podium. Beside him was a young man in his 20s, his son. The allegations against Dr. Nia Toussaint are not only false. The ambassador was saying they are a malicious fabrication by a desperate criminal. Dr. Toussaint is a hero. 10 years ago, she risked her career to perform an unauthorized emergency procedure that saved my son's life. The screen changed. It showed a grainy video. It was inside an operating room. It showed a younger Nia Toussaint pushing aside a frozen, panic-stricken older doctor. It showed her hands moving with lightning speed, clamping a bleeding artery. "This is the unedited footage," the ambassador continued. "It proves her competence and her bravery. And as for the source of these lies, we have traced the IP address of the leak to a hotel in Queens, New York. We have shared this location with the FBI." Preston dropped the bottle. It shattered on the floor. A siren wailed outside, then another. Then the sound of a megaphone. "Preston Cole, this is the FBI. Come out with your hands up." He ran to the window. The street below was filled with black SUVs. He had tried to use a lie to destroy the truth, but the truth, like cream, or like a determined woman in seat 34B, always rises to the top. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. It wasn't just reporters this time. It was flight attendants, pilots, medical students, ordinary people who had followed the saga of the first-class bully. Preston Cole sat at the defense table. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. He had aged 10 years in 6 months. The charges were extensive: cyber-stalking, defamation, corporate espionage, and interference with the flight crew. Nia Toussaint sat in the front row. She wasn't there to testify today. The evidence, the video, the IP logs, the Geneva testimony spoke for itself. She was there to witness the end of the chapter. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Halloway, read the sentence. Mr. Cole, your actions were born of a belief that your status made you untouchable. You treated people as commodities and laws as suggestions. You attempted to destroy a woman's life because she dared to say no to you. Preston stared at the table. For the count of interference with a flight crew, I sentence you to 2 years in federal prison. For the counts of defamation and cyberstalking, I sentence you to an additional 3 years consecutive. 5 years. Preston didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just slumped. Furthermore, the judge added, "You are permanently placed on the federal no-fly list. You will never step foot on a commercial aircraft again." A gasp went through the room. For a man like Preston, who defined his worth by his mobility and his global status, this was a death sentence. He was grounded forever. As the baifs led him away, he passed by the front row. He stopped for a second and looked at Na. "I just wanted my seat," he whispered. Nia looked at him, her expression calm, almost pitying. "It was never your seat, Preston," she said softly. "It was just a chair. You were the one who made it a throne." He was led away, the doors closed. Nia walked out of the courthouse and into the bright sunlight of a New York spring. Sarah was waiting for her by the car. "It's over," Sarah said. "Yes," Nia agreed. "It is what now, back to the office." Nia looked up at the sky. A jet was tracing a white line across the blue, heading east towards Europe. "No," Nia said. "Take me to the airport. You have a flight." "No," Nia smiled. "I have a class to teach." The scene shifted to a hangar at JFK. Inside, 50 young students sat in rows of chairs. They were a diverse group, different races, different backgrounds, all wearing blue jumpsuits with the Tucson Aviation logo. This was the first class of the 34B Scholarship Fund. Nia walked to the front of the room. The students went silent. They looked at her with wide eyes. "Welcome," Nia said. "You are here because you have potential. You are here because you want to fly." She walked over to a mock-up of an airplane fuselage used for training. "Before we learn about aerodynamics or navigation," Nia said, "we are going to learn the most important lesson of aviation." She pointed to the cockpit. Then she pointed to the very last row of seats. "Physics doesn't care about your bank account." Nia said, "Gravity pulls on the millionaire in 1A, just as hard as it pulls on the student in 34B. The air outside is minus 60 degrees for everyone. In the sky, we are all equal. We rely on each other to survive." She looked at the faces of the students' future pilots, future engineers, the people who would build the next generation. "Your job isn't just to fly the plane," Nia said. "Your job is to protect the dignity of every soul on board, because you never know who is sitting in the back row. It might be someone who can change the world. It might be you." She smiled. "Now," she said, "let's get to work." And that is how a simple seat dispute brought down a corporate tyrant and changed the aviation industry forever. Preston Cole thought he was fighting a passenger, but he was fighting the truth. That money can buy a ticket, but it can't buy class. He spent 5 years in a cell while the 34B Fund launched the careers of over 1,000 pilots who knew that integrity flies higher than arrogance. It's a reminder to all of us. Treat everyone with respect. Whether they're the CEO or the janitor, whether they're in first class or the back row. You never know who you're talking to, and you never know when the karma you dish out is going to turn the plane around and come right back at you. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to stay humble. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching and safe travels.